All right, so I think I've got version 1 of the planetarium show on the precessional clock that we will be filming here in very short order, but here it goes.
A cross-disciplinary framework for the precessional clock. A cross-disciplinary framework for understanding civilizational cycles by Kaya Labs. Integrating archaeoastronomy, glacial geology, comparative religion, and agricultural archaeology. Abstract. Earth's axial precession, the slow 25,772-year wobble of the planet's rotational axis, is among the most consequential and underappreciated rhythms in human history. This paper argues that precession functions as a master metronome. It determines which star occupies the celestial North Pole, modulates ice age cycles through Milankovitch orbital forcing, drives the catastrophic meltwater pulses that reshaped global coastlines, and opened the hydrological windows in which agriculture, and therefore complex civilization, first became possible. We further propose that multiple ancient cultures encoded awareness of this cycle in durable architectural form, and that the mythological and theological traditions that survived to the literate era are best understood not as primitive superstition but as compressed observational data transmitted across generations in the only medium available, story, stone, and sky. Where factual evidence is robust, we present it as such. Where interpretation is required, we say so plainly. Either physical foundation, precession as pacemaker, the geometry is straightforward. Earth's rotational axis is tilted approximately 23.5 degrees relative to its orbital plane, and that axis traces a slow circular path, like a spinning top running down, completing one full revolution every 25,772 years. The consequence for the night sky is dramatic. The celestial North Pole continuously migrates through a 47 degrees wide circle of constellations. Polaris, our current North Star, is actually a temporary occupant of that position. It will be closest to the pole around 2100 CE and will thereafter drift away, replaced by Aldebaran, 7500 CE, then Deneb Cygnus, 9800 CE, and eventually Vega, 14,000 CE. This is not interpretation, it is calculated celestial mechanics, confirmed by millennia of observational records and fully reproducible with modern precession modeling. What makes it consequential beyond navigation is its coupling to climate, combined with changes in axial tilt, obliquity, and orbital eccentricity. Precession constitutes the Milankovitch forcing mechanism, the pacemaker of Earth's glacial interglacial cycles, documented independently in Antarctic ice cores, deep sea sediment oxygen isotope ratios, and coral records from the Caribbean and Pacific. The sky and the ice sheet are running on the same clock, too. The pole star sequence and its cultural correlates. The following table represents the best current estimate of the North Pole star sequence across the precessional cycle, cross-referenced with known cultural and geological markers. Star constellation peak proximity minutes. Distance associated period. Deneb. Greek letter alpha Cygnus. The Swan 18,000 BCE 7 degrees last glacial maximum. Swan mythology emerges across Eurasia. Vega. Greek letter alpha Lyra 12,000 BCE 4 degrees meltwater pulses 1a and 1b. End of the Pleistocene. Thuban. Greek letter alpha Draco 2700 BCE. 0.1 degrees Egyptian Old Kingdom. Great Pyramid Northern Shaft Alignment. Polaris Greek letter alpha Umi. Ursa Minor 2100 CE 0.5 degrees current epoch. Closest approach in the entire cycle. Aldebaran. Greek letter alpha Cepheus 7500 CE 3 degrees future North Star. Deneb. Returns. Cygnus 9800 CE 7 degrees the Swan returns. Vega. Returns. Lyra 14,000 CE 4 degrees next potential glaciation risk window. The alignment of the Great Pyramid's King's Chamber northern shaft with Thuban at approximately 600 BCE. Verified by independent survey and confirmed within 0.5 degrees, establishes that at least one ancient civilization not only knew the current pole star but built permanently to commemorate it, implying awareness that the position was impermanent. 3. when Cygnus held the north. The swan in science and myth. Around 18,000 BCE, at the depth of the last glacial maximum, Deneb, the brightest star in Cygnus, the swan, was the closest bright star to the celestial North Pole. The entire northern sky rotated around the swan. For Eurasian peoples watching the night sky from latitudes of 40 degrees minus 60 degree north, Cygnus was the immovable anchor of the heavens. This fact sits alongside an independent observation. Swans breed in the high Arctic and migrate south through Europe and Asia each autumn, returning north each spring. They are among the largest, most visible, and most behaviorally distinctive migratory birds in the northern hemisphere. For Paleolithic and Mesolithic populations, the seasonal arrival and departure of swans from the north constituted a reliable, living calendar signal. The convergence of these two facts, the sky rotating around the swan arriving from the north bearing the season, provides a parsimonious explanation for the remarkable cross-cultural persistence of swan symbolism in northern cosmologies. Greek accounts of Hyperborea, the paradise beyond Boreas, the north wind, describe Apollo departing Greece each winter on a chariot of swans, wintering in this northern paradise, and returning in spring. Egyptian, Vedic, and Norse traditions each associate a specific bird with cosmic north or divine creation. The conventional reading treats these as independent mythological inventions. A more economical reading is that they reflect a shared, ancient stratum of astronomical and ecological observation, compressed and repackaged by successive cultures, but pointing at the same original sky. Interpretive note: whether swan mythology derives from a single cultural origin or from convergent independent observation of the same astronomical and ecological realities cannot currently be resolved. Both explanations are consistent with the evidence. IV. Meltwater pulses and the archaeology of flooded coastlines. Between approximately 21,000 BCE and 7,000 BCE, global sea levels rose by 120-130 meters. That rise was not gradual. It occurred in documented catastrophic pulses. Meltwater Pulse 1A, 14,700 to 13,500 BCE. Sea levels rose 16-25 meters in roughly 400-500 years, approximately 40-60 mm per year, a rate with no modern analog. The source was primarily the Antarctic and Laurentide ice sheets responding to Ballinalarad warming. This event is documented in Tahitian and Barbados coral records. Fairbanks, 1989. Deschamps et al., 2012. Meltwater Pulse 1B. 11,500 to 11,200 BCE. A second major pulse of 7-13 meters coincided with the termination of the Younger Dryas cold interval. This event marks the definitive end of the last ice age and the beginning of the Holocene. The significance for human history is direct. At the last glacial maximum, global coastlines extended 100 to 200 kilometers beyond their current positions, and continental shelves now submerged under 50-130 meters of water were inhabited landscapes, riverine plains, estuaries, and coastal terraces that would have supported high population densities. The progressive inundation of these landscapes between 14,000 and 7,000 BCE constitutes the largest loss of inhabited terrain in human prehistory. It happened within the span of collective memory. Plato's account of Atlantis, sourced through Egyptian priests at Sais and recorded in the Timaeus, 360 BCE, places the civilization's destruction at 9,000 years before Solon, approximately 9,600 BCE. This date falls precisely within the post-MWP-1B period of accelerated coastal change. This correlation does not prove the historicity of Atlantis. It does establish that the narrative's geological timing is consistent with real events, and that literate Greek civilization was separated from those events by roughly the same temporal distance as we are from the fall of Rome, close enough for institutional memory to persist through priestly traditions, but long enough for compression and mythologization. The geologically younger mid-Atlantic ridge and eastern Atlantic margin, still seismically active Mesozoic and Cenozoic crust, would have been particularly vulnerable to compounding effects, sea level rise, isostatic adjustment, and seismically triggered submarine landslides. By contrast, the Appalachian Mountains, 480 ma, and the Laurentian Shield, 2,500 to 3,800 ma, are among Earth's oldest and most stable surface rocks. barely registering the ice loading that dramatically deformed younger crust to the north. The North American drainage system as a record of deglaciation. The Laurentide ice sheet, which covered all of Canada and much of the northern United States, collapsed through three primary drainage corridors between approximately 14,000 and 7,000 BCE. Each corridor has left geomorphological signatures that are still measurable today. The Eastern Corridor, Great Lakes and St. Lawrence. As the ice retreated northward, meltwater cooled along the ice margin, forming a sequence of preglacial megalakes that briefly unified the Great Lakes basin into a single massive water body. The southern overflow drained through the Chicago outlet, the Illinois River toward the Mississippi, before ice retreat opened the St. Lawrence Corridor. The land surface around Chicago is still rebounding isostatically to the northwest. Measurably today, Hudson Bay, which sat under the thickest part of the Laurentide sheet, continues to rise at approximately 1 centimeter per year, a geological process still in progress 8,000 years after the ice melted. The Central Corridor, Mississippi watershed. The Mississippi carried the bulk of continental meltwater south into the Gulf of Mexico and, ultimately, into the Atlantic Basin. The most dramatic event in this corridor was the catastrophic drainage of glacial lake Agassiz, the largest preglacial lake in North American history, covering approximately 440,000 square kilometers at its maximum extent, around 8,200 BCE. Its final discharge into the North Atlantic via the St. Lawrence is associated with a sharp, documented cooling event visible in Greenland ice cores, plausibly the result of freshwater disruption to Atlantic thermohaline circulation. The Western Corridor, Pacific drainage and the Great Basin. The Missoula floods, produced by the repeated catastrophic failure of an ice dam impounding glacial Lake Missoula, occurred between approximately 15,000 and 13,000 BCE, scouring the channeled scablands of eastern Washington in events that individually moved more water than all of Earth's current rivers combined. Meltwater that did not reach the Pacific settled into closed basins across the American West. Glacial Lake Bonneville, approximately 52,000 square kilometers, roughly the size of Lake Michigan. Its remnant is the Great Salt Lake, and Glacial Lake Lahontan, 22,000 square kilometers, in Nevada. These pluvial lakes represent the terminal settling of the western Laurentide drainage, and their shoreline terraces are visible on Utah and Nevada hillsides today. 6. Theological evolution as documented cultural transmission. The emergence of Abrahamic monotheism is sometimes presented as a theological rupture, a new idea. The documentary record suggests otherwise. It is more accurately described as the terminal crystallization of a theological arc traceable across more than 2,000 years of Egyptian, Canaanite, and Levantine religious development. Egyptian theology between approximately 3,100 and 1,550 BCE operated as a dynamic polytheism in which distinct cosmological principles, Ra, the visible solar disk, 2,600 BCE, Amun the hidden wind creator of Thebes, 2100 BCE, and Osiris, the death and rebirth cycle, were actively syncretized across dynasties. The fusion of Amun and Ra into Amun-Ra during the Middle Kingdom created a single supreme creative source with multiple aspects. Not monotheism, but a structural proto-monotheism. Akhenaten's Aten reform, 1353 to 1336 BCE, took this structure to its logical extreme, collapsing the entire pantheon into a single solar disk and closing all other temples. The experiment lasted 15 years and was politically reversed, but the structural concept it demonstrated, a single, exclusive, non-representable deity, was now institutionally proven. Textual parallels between the hymn to Aten and Psalm 104 are widely noted in comparative religious scholarship and are consistent with Egyptian Canaanite theological transmission. The Greek system sits at a cultural crossroads in this transmission. Zeus is a consolidating figure, the source from which Apollo, solar order, Poseidon, oceanic force, and Demeter agricultural cycle, derive their authority. Greek scholarship has long identified direct mythological borrowings from Near Eastern sources, the Cronus narrative from Canaanite El, Aphrodite from Astarte, Hermes from Thoth. These are not borrowings in a pejorative sense. They are the same cosmological data migrating across linguistic and cultural borders, reformated for new audiences. On the question of Amen, the Egyptian divine name Amun, the Hidden One, and the Abrahamic prayer closing Amen, Hebrew, from a root meaning so be it or truth. Share phonology and structural theological function, affirming the presence of the hidden creative source at prayer's end. The etymological connection is contested in academic linguistics, with some scholars arguing independent Semitic roots. What is not contested is the structural theological continuity, a hidden creator principle, affirmed verbally, surviving across 3,000 years of cultural transformation. 7. Agricultural windows and the post-glacial hydrological stabilization. The independent emergence of agriculture across multiple world regions between approximately 10,000 and 5,000 BCE is not adequately explained by any single factor. However, one factor is necessary in all cases: stable, seasonally predictable hydrology. That condition was met, in each region, precisely when deglaciation delivered it. Southwest Asia, wheat and barley, 10,500 to 9,500 BCE. The earliest evidence of systematic grain cultivation in the Fertile Crescent coincides with the post-Younger Dryas warming and the end of MWP-1b. The Natufian culture of the Levant transitions from intensive wild grass harvesting to deliberate replanting within approximately 500 years of the Holocene opening. The Fertile Crescent seasonal hydrology, rain-fed, highly variable year to year, created strong incentives for active crop management over pure foraging. East Asia, rice, 7,000 to 6,500 BCE. The Himalayan Tibetan plateau holds approximately 40,000 cubic kilometers of ice, the largest non-polar glaciated mass on Earth. As Holocene warming stabilized meltwater delivery from the Himalayas into the Yangtze, Mekong, Irrawaddy, Brahmaputra, and Yellow River systems, it created the warm, wet, flood recession agricultural niches that paddy rice cultivation requires. The Himalayas are ancient Cenozoic collision crust, 50 million years old, geologically stable, lacking the catastrophic drainage events that characterized younger North American glacial systems. Himalayan meltwater delivered predictability. Rice farming emerged precisely when that predictability was first established, in the Yangtze River Valley around 7000 BCE. Mesoamerica, maize, 9000 BCE wild manipulation, 3500 BCE intensive cultivation. Teosinte, the wild ancestor of maize, was first selectively manipulated in the Balsas River highlands of Mexico around 9000 BCE, immediately following North American deglaciation. Intensive maize cultivation and the formal agricultural calendar technologies of the Maya Corridor. 5001, 500 BCE, developed as Mesoamerican rainfall patterns stabilized after the conclusion of Laurentide meltwater events. The Mayan long count calendar, 5,125.36 years in duration, is precisely 1/5 of the precessional cycle of 25,627 years. Whether this proportion was intentionally encoded or is a geometric coincidence is a legitimate open question. What is not in question is that this civilization built a multi-millennial agricultural calendar of extraordinary precision, and that it was embedded in a cosmological framework of cyclical, recurring deep time. South America, quinoa and potato, 8000 BCE. The Lake Titicaca Basin in the Bolivian-Peruvian Altiplano became agriculturally viable as Andean glacial retreat stabilized the high-altitude wetland hydrology of the basin. The raised field and terracing agriculture that eventually supported Tiwanaku and Inca civilization required consistent, manageable water delivery, conditions created by the same post-glacial stabilization process visible elsewhere. The pattern is consistent across 4 independent agricultural origins. In every case, the intensification of food production follows within a few thousand years of the establishment of stable post-glacial hydrology in that specific region. The clock running this sequence is the precessional Milankovitch system. 8. The encoding of precession in built form. The hypothesis that ancient civilizations possessed and encoded knowledge of the precessional cycle is not dependent on any single monument or inscription. It rests on a convergence of independently verified architectural alignments across cultures that had no documented contact. The Great Pyramid of Gizeh's King's Chamber northern shaft points to the lower culmination of Thuban, Greek letter Alpha Draconis, at an elevation matching the star's position at approximately 2600 BCE, confirmed by independent survey within 0.5 degrees. Borval and Gilbert, 1993. Cross-verified by multiple subsequent studies. This alignment is meaningless unless the builders knew both the current pole star and the implicit fact that pole stars are not permanent. At Chichen Itza, the El Castillo pyramid encodes multiple calendar systems in its architecture. 91 steps on each of 4 faces plus the top platform equals 365 a solar year. Each face carries 9 terraces equaling the 18-month hard ritual year. At the spring and autumn equinoxes, the northwest corner shadow produces the famous serpent descent illusion, an event requiring sub-degree precision in the building's orientation. Teotihuacan's Pyramid of the Sun is oriented so that the setting Pleiades aligned with its west face at approximately 150 BCE, and the city's grid is rotated 15.5 degrees east of north, a deliberate orientation serving simultaneous solar and Pleiades alignments. The Pleiades heliacal rising was used across multiple cultures to mark the agricultural new year. Teotihuacan's grid physically inscribed this into the land. Stonehenge's primary alignment to midsummer sunrise and midwinter sunset is confirmed by survey and is unambiguous. Its 56 Aubrey holes can function as an eclipse predictor operating on a 56-year cycle approximating 3 Ceres-adjacent periods. Whether this was deliberate is debated, but the solar alignment is precise and intentional. Collectively, these monuments represent a global pattern. Civilizations at the threshold of historical record were invested in encoding astronomical time at civilizational scale, in permanent stone, with sub-degree precision. The most parsimonious explanation is that they understood, through centuries of prior observation, that the sky is a clock, and that the clock's longest hand takes approximately 26,000 years to complete one revolution. 9. Synthesis. The precessional framework. The threads assembled here are not speculative connections imposed on unrelated data. They are independently established findings from separate disciplines that converge on a single causal chain. Axial precession Milankovitch climate forcing glacial advance and retreat meltwater pulses and sea level change hydrological stabilization agricultural window civilizational emergence astronomical encoding of the cycle that caused it all. What distinguishes this framework from conventional disciplinary accounts is the insistence on treating the cycle as a unified system rather than examining each component in isolation. Glaciologists study meltwater pulses. Archaeobotanists study agricultural origins. Archaeoastronomers study monument alignments. Comparative religionists study theological transmission. Each field has produced robust findings. What has been less systematically explored is the degree to which these findings are not merely contemporaneous but causally linked, and linked specifically to the 25,772-year clock. The cultural outputs that survive. Flood narratives on every inhabited continent. The swan as a pan-Eurasian symbol of cosmic north. The convergent theological arc from solar polytheism to monotheism. The multi-millennial calendrical precision of Mayan and Egyptian astronomy are not best understood as evidence of human imagination. They are better understood as evidence of human memory. A very long, very faithful record of what the sky looked like, what the water did, and what it meant to live through a planetary transition. Where the evidence is robust, the precession period, the meltwater pulse magnitudes and dates, the Great Pyramid shaft alignment, the agricultural origin chronologies, the isostatic rebound measurements, and the theological documentary record from Egypt through the Levant. Where interpretation is required, the direct connection between Mayan long count and intentional precessional encoding, the single origin versus convergent evolution question for swan symbolism, the specific identification of any Atlantic coastal feature with Plato's Atlantis, and the etymological lineage of our men from Amun specifically rather than from parallel Semitic roots. The distinction matters. The framework does not require the interpretive claims to stand. It stands on the factual ones alone. Correspondence and inquiries welcome. This pad.
Alright, so that is first draft. We're coming in around 24 minutes and 30 seconds. So it kind of keeps us in the window that we're looking to have a show presentation be. And of course there will be all kinds of fun video and things from the planetarium here and the chronometer and the sites But that's that. So that's version 1. I'm going to try a couple of different versions and we'll see what we lock in with. This had some issues. Obviously, I have to work out how to put tables into the mix and spell out million instead of ma for all those abbreviations and whatnot. But live, learn. We're going to make the next version next. So hope everybody's well. Peace.